let's see, marks the most. I'll read this. This probably isn't going to be easy to answer the way I'm going to read it. Mother's Day marks the most blank on any given day of the year. What happens more often on Mother's Day than most other days? Phone calls. What did you say? Going out to eat. That's a close second, but phone calls. The number of phone calls on Mother's Day increases by at least, on average, 37% for that one day. Okay. Not the same for Father's Day, by the way. But Mother's Day, people call their moms. All right. But in light of what your answer was, Mother's Day is the busiest day of the year for restaurants. So more so than any other day, Mother's Day is the busiest because moms do not want to cook and they don't want people messing up their kitchen either. Okay. Which day of the week are the most babies born on?
Which day of the week?
Uh-huh.
Saturday.
Not Saturday. Yeah.
Wednesday.
No.
Mondays.
You just got to start naming days. Y'all still haven't hit it yet. Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Yeah, I don't know why, but there's more births on Tuesday than any other day of the week. For whatever that's worth. I don't even know.
Like some babies are just naturally born on Tuesdays, and other ones are like doctors are inducing.
Yeah, and it's their day.
Over their weekend.
Yeah. That could be true.
Golf on Saturday and Sunday, so.
Yeah, that's right. I'm busy. Yeah. Well, and it's also maybe the parents want to get home before the weekend too, so you go ahead and do the birth on Tuesday. I don't know. Anyway, whatever. What type of flower is associated most with Mother's Day? Not roses, carnations. Man, you're on fire today. Sherry's got this down. Carnations are most associated with Mother's Day. Okay. Do Americans spend more money on Mother's Day or Father's Day? Mother's Day. Now, here's the most recent. This is 2021. So I don't know, 2022 numbers. This is 2021 numbers. On average, consumers spent $219 on their moms and $190 on their dads.
Yes, it should be.
Yeah. I'm like, 200. That's an awful lot. Yeah. I know I don't spend that much on Christy. Yeah, 219.
But do you want texting Marcia?
Yeah.
Like,
And
you would want,
and both those numbers,
ends and spot? Yeah.
but listen, both those numbers double for millennials, Brandon.
Like, I spend more money
Yeah.
on my mom?
Yeah. Millennials spend more on their moms and their dads than us Gen Xers. So, for whatever that's worth.
Cards cost almost that.
Here's a $219 card. Happy Mother's Day. Do what?
I sticker shock on my card today because I just bought 3 cards and I wasn't looking at the price.
Yeah.
I was like, what did I spend so much money on?
Yeah, the cards.
Wait, that doesn't add up. If the number one thing is cards,
Well, that's because it's in addition to. They buy the cards, but then they're also going to buy the flowers and the spa day and the.
Yeah.
unless they're just getting cash on the card.
I don't know. I can show you. I mean, it's on the internet, so it must be true.
My sister and my brother-in-law, on either Mother's or Father's Day or whatever, they go to the store, they pick out a card and they read it and they put
Yeah.
it back.
I've heard of that. I've heard of people doing that for Valentine's Day. They take their significant other to the card section, pick one out. Here, read this, and then they put it back so they don't have to spend the huge amount of money on a card.
You can only save so many,
Yeah. I think the Valentine's Day. I think Christy took art supplies from the school that she's a principal at, and made me a Valentine's Day card this year. So she did not spend $219. See, sweet or cheap, either one. I mean, it works. It's fine with me.
sweet factor.
Yeah.
My husband always bought me a big box of candy and each one of the girls a smaller box.
Oh, that's nice.
I mean, it was just,
Yeah, that's nice.
automatic. Cheap ones, I got the good one.
Okay, aside from cards and flowers, obviously those be the two highest for Mother's Day. What's well, it used to be the third most popular. It's starting to lose traction, but the third most popular gift.
Buy a vacuum cleaner.
It's not an appliance, huh? Jewelry. That's right. Jewelry would be behind cards and flowers. But what's gaining traction on jewelry now is spa and beauty salon.
Self-care.
Yeah. Okay, we did the day of the week was Tuesday. In which month are the most babies born in the U.S.?
August.
You're right.
I have 15 birthdays in August.
Good grief. Okay, August is the most babies born, and the CDC says July through October is your busiest months, but August is the most. This I'm saying, you start doing the math and like, what were people doing? Okay,
That's why I was like trying to backtrack. Oh, well.
I will tell you along those lines, like, so there were Christy when we were at Southside and Rogers, there were 5 moms, including Christy, that had their babies within a week of each other, or within 2 weeks, because one of them was a little bit before. But there were 4, like Griffin and Parker Rickard were born on the same day, and Sawyer Price and Kobe Venable were born 6 days later on the same day. So besides being there for our own family, like I was going up to the hospital, back in that time where St. Mary's was in Rogers, to visit different people in the hospital. But man, for that month of September, it seemed like, not just from our church, it seemed like every time I went by the hospital to visit somebody, there's somebody carrying out, a baby in a car seat. Well, that December, we had a huge ice storm that came through. And everybody was trapped in their houses. I'm just guessing there was nothing else to do. There was an influx. There was a spike in the population in Northwest Arkansas in September of 2001, just so everybody knows. Anyway, and I'll say, so in which month are the least amount of babies born in the U.S.?
February.
Yes, you're right. Did you do math again and try to figure out what was going on?
What's 9 months before that?
I don't know. I have to count backwards.
It's going to be August. Just like
Yeah.
June, July.
Yeah. No, August was the highest month that they're born. February is the least. So count back. I don't know what's not happening. Too hot for baby making, she said. I'm glad I repeated that into the microphone on our social media. Too hot for baby making. What day of the week? Okay, so the most births are on Tuesday. What day of the week are there the least amount of births?
Saturday.
Almost.
Sunday.
Sunday. Which again, I think your weekend theory is like doctors are inducing they don't want to do anything on the weekend. Were you? Yeah. What? Again, I didn't make these up. I can show you the source I got them from. What is the most common birth date in the year?
You mean the day of the month?
No, like the actual. Yeah, the month and the day. Like what number? Like what's the date?
She said August, right?
September 1st.
August, because we have birthdays on the 1st, the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, the 10th, the 12th.
It's not August. I'm just telling you.
Ah.
No, August has the most total. It's weird. August has the most total births.
June 21st.
No,
We have 3 birthdays on June 21st.
is that right? It's September 9th.
Don't have one.
So I don't know. I guess if you just like look at social security numbers and stuff, that's the. So if you're gonna steal somebody's identity, go with September 9th as a birthday. Or if you're coming up with a fake ID. What is the? This may go back again to Tracy's theory on when doctors want to actually go through with deliveries. What is the least common birth date in the year? Birthday date. Yep, Christmas Day.
I feel sorry for anybody going on Christmas
Yeah.
Well, except Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
Except Jesus. That's true. And we all know he was born.
That's right. That's right.
Social media says so. That's right.
Had a cake and candles and everything. It was crazy. So, anyway, just few facts. They may or may not be accurate. Again, they were on the internet, so I'm pretty sure they're accurate because everything on the internet is. Galatians chapter 5. Let's get back into Galatians. That's where we've been the last several weeks, and we're nearing the end. We're on track to be done by the end of the month with our study in Galatians. So we'll see if that's what actually happens or not. Brandon walked us through the first section of Galatians 5 last week, and I just want to go back and hit a couple of highlights. First of all, you guys may or may not remember this, but the first class that we had several weeks ago when we started this study of Galatians, I said, in my opinion, Galatians 5 verse 1, along with verse 13, I guess, is which we'll get into today, is the key to this whole letter. Okay, what has been the big issue that Paul has been addressing in this letter to the Galatians? Okay, circumcision and kind of using that as the focal point of the overall thing, like the concept that you have to be, in order to be a true, I guess, full Christian, you had to become Jewish too. Like, you got Jesus, but you also got to obey the old law, and specifically circumcision. And then there's also, he's kind of mentioned, like, the Passover and different feasts and festivals and traditions and things like that. And Paul has been addressing this rather vehemently throughout this whole letter, being really upset and angry that this church is buying into this mindset that Jesus isn't enough. And so he's been kind of laying out that argument for several chapters. And again, as Brandon mentioned last week, when we get into chapter 5, he starts kind of becoming a little bit more practical. Now that I've established the fact that you receive the promises of being children of the Father simply by believing in Jesus, giving your life to him, obeying him because of your love for him, those, it has nothing to do with the old law and the old traditions. Since we have established that is true, here's what that means, okay? Which is what chapters 5 and 6 are all about. So the first thing in chapter 5 and verse 1, again, we talked about it last week, but I want to read it one more time. It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. He views this trying to live under Jewish law as enslaving. It chains us up. The yoke, you can think about, I mean, y'all may have experienced this, in growing up days, but definitely back in ancient times when you had oxen that you were using to either drive a cart or plow a field or whatever. You had this big, heavy wooden thing that you would lay across their shoulders, across their necks, so that you could direct them whichever way you wanted to go. Paul says, if you believe that you have to be Jewish and obey the old laws in order to be a Christian, it's the same as putting that thing on your own neck. You are allowing yourself to be enslaved and weighed down by this burden, and allowing these traditions to steer you into whatever directions they want you to go. Does that make sense? But the key, just to me personally, one of the most powerful parts of this verse is the very first statement. It is for freedom that Christ set us free. Why did Jesus set us free? Why did Jesus set us free from sin and from the law and from our guilt and from our shame and all the darkness that we were in, all the different adjectives that you can use to describe what life was like before Jesus? Why did he set us free from that? Right. And Paul says he set you free so that you could be free, which seems just almost like, well, duh. But that's a powerful statement. There's nothing self-serving in it for Jesus. He didn't set you free so that you would have to serve him. He didn't set you free so that you would be indebted to him. Now, Do we serve him because of what he did for us? Absolutely. But he set us free whether we even wanted to be set free or not. He provided that opportunity for us because he couldn't stand for us to be in bondage to our sin, our guilt, and all those other things. Does that make sense? That's an amazingly loving thing to do. And it's such a simple statement, but there's so much power there. And that's, I mean, seriously, if y'all have heard me preach for a few years at Flagstone, I've used this verse multiple times. Because we're supposed to be living free lives. We're supposed to be living free lives. Okay? Now, we take that, and again, I don't want to rehash everything that Brandon talked about last week. I want to jump down to verse 13 where we're starting today, because in verses 2 through 12, Paul lays out this whole the problem with still being enslaved to circumcision and everything that Brandon walked us through last week. Okay. But then in verse 13, he goes back to this freedom thing that he mentioned in verse 1. So what does verse 13 say? You, my brothers, were called to be free, which is what he just said in verse 1, right? You've been set free. Christ set you free. And the reason that he set you free is because he loved you that much. He wanted you to be free. He wanted to see you not be enslaved anymore. So you were called to be free. But what? Don't abuse your freedom. With that freedom comes responsibility. Okay? Do not use your freedom to indulge the sinful nature. So there's a caveat to it. And again, this is Paul addressing the argument before it's made. Okay? He's assuming that there's going to be people, especially if he's been laying out through his whole letter how you don't have to get circumcised. You don't have to do the old traditions anymore. And then he, makes this powerful statement. You are called to be free. There's going to be people that are like, oh, well, I'm free, so I can do whatever I want to do. And there's no consequences. Awesome. I don't have to be locked up anymore. I don't have to be chained by rules and regulations anymore. I don't have to obey anybody anymore. I can call my own shots. I can do whatever it is that I want to. And Paul says, before you even go down that road, hold on. Don't use your freedom to indulge the sinful nature. Now, do we, and I already know the answer, but I'll ask it anyway. In our American culture nowadays in 2023, do we abuse our freedom? It's probably not a really good way to ask that question.
Religiously or like nationally?
Either. I mean, can you just our culture? Do we take advantage of, maybe a better way? Abuse may not be the right word, but are we using our freedom responsibly?
Yes.
I don't think we are.
Okay.
I just think people tend to want to live their own lives as the way that sounds good to them,
Mm-hmm.
that's fun for them, that's fulfilling for them, whether it infringes on the rights of other people,
Mm-hmm.
or whether it does, drives them to a sinful nature.
Mm-hmm.
I just think people just see how far they can push the envelope.
Right.
I mean, it just seems to me.
Right. I'm really speaking in generalities here. I think there is a mindset in our culture of because I live in this free country and because there are rights guaranteed me, then I have the right to do whatever I want. And it happens more, I think, to answer your question, are we talking about religiously or nationally? It does. We see it more prevalent, especially us as Christians. If we say, well, there's a way that God wants us to live, and then there's people in our country like, you can't force that on me. I'm a free person. You can't tell me what I can or can't do. But if we truly lived in complete freedom, it'd be anarchy. If everybody did whatever they wanted to all the time, that's a problem. And yet when somebody does point out a choice that we're making or an action that we're taking, and like, man, I don't know if that's the best thing. You can't force your religious or your moral standards or your values on me. That's your perspective, but I'm free to do whatever I want to do. And I don't want to turn this into a political thing or even necessarily a religious thing. I'm just saying, like, I feel like in our culture, and it's not new. I say here in 2023, it's been that way for generations. It just evidences itself in different ways. There's always that risk when freedom is granted of going over the top, going beyond what you probably should. Think about it this way. With kids, you want kids, to grow up having a sense of, individuality and recognizing their own talents and abilities and using their gifts and doing the things that they want to do and, growing and maturing and all that kind of stuff. But do you limit them at different stages of their life? Do you put some limitations in place? Yeah. We do, right? Yeah. Make the attempt to. Okay. What if your kid comes to you and says, but I'm free. This is a free country. I can do what I want. See you later. And that's the struggle, right? As a parent, is like, I want you to feel free. I want you to experience freedom. I want that for you. But I already know you're going to, if I just turn you loose, you're going to make some really dumb choices and suffer through some really difficult consequences. So I have to put some things in place, right?
Well, there's chains on both sides. That's why, like, if Paul just ended his letter in verse 12, I'm going to be like, well, here we go.
Yeah, I'm free.
There's chains in too many, like, you're locked up and making the law your God. And then there's this freedom in Christ. And then there's chains in freedom.
Right.
I'm free to do whatever I want. So if I'm free to drink as much as I want, I am being held in bondage by alcohol or drugs or addictions or whatever.
Right.
And so it's like there's chains on either side. That's why, Paul's got to have this. Hey, listen, here's that. There's freedom that is actually chains.
Yeah.
So let's figure out what this freedom looks like.
Yeah. I think of it this way. I won't say which one of my kids. You make a very good point, Brandon, that like even the stuff that we would indulge in, that we would be free to indulge in, can be imprisoning. Yeah. And enslaving. One of my kids in elementary school, I can't remember, he was either third or fourth grade. I want to say third grade. They went on a field trip. I think like they went down to the Walton Art Center or someplace like that, and they had to, watch a play that was for kids. I don't remember exactly what it was, but they had to be, had to be good, had to behave, had to sit still and be quiet and all those kind of things. And when they rode the bus back, and of course you got to behave on the bus too, and when they pulled the bus in the parking lot, the teachers had already talked ahead of time, like, we're going to have the bus driver pull up, and we're just going to let them off on the playground, and like they can just take off and burn some of this energy that they've kept pinned up. It was a really good idea because they had done good. Let's let them have some release. So they open the bus doors, kids go running out, and my kid and his buddies, they're all just screaming, running, going crazy, and he just turns, just punches the kid. And it wasn't out of meanness. It was just like, just so excited to be free. Was that the best choice for him? Obviously not. He got in trouble for it. That's what I think of after receiving that phone call. That's what I think of here in verse 13, what Paul is getting at. Man, if we took the chains off, and you think about this yoked animal that we talked about a second ago, or animal that's chained up, as soon as you take the chains off, they just go running. Well, that may not be the best thing. Just to immediately have freedom, like, oh, I can do whatever I want. There's probably going to be some consequences of that. So, yes, you're free. You've been set free from sin. You've been set free from the law. You're free to experience all the blessings that there are of being a child of God. But be careful with that. Like, use that freedom responsibly. And be smart with it. Don't use your freedom to do what? What does he say specifically? Don't use your freedom
Indulge the flesh.
to indulge yours says flesh, mine says sinful nature. Okay. Anybody else got a different word there? It's probably one of those two.
Mine says don't not to do wrong.
Don't do wrong. Okay. And it's funny. There's a word here, like I said in the NIV, it says, "Do not use your freedom to indulge sinful nature." In the actual Greek, there's a word kind of wedged in there. Don't use this as an opportunity. There's a Greek word for opportunity there, and it literally means as it's the word for starting point. Like I'm launching forward from this place. So it's like I don't know, maybe an Olympic swimmer that as soon as the gun goes off, they leap off the platform to start swimming. There's a launching point. Don't use your freedom as a launching point to do things that you shouldn't be doing. These fleshly things, this sinful nature. And the word that's used here for flesh or wrong or sinful nature is the word that's used throughout the New Testament for flesh, for either a body itself or something connected to the body. But it's used either as that physically or a metaphorical kind of meaning, or it's something that is focused on myself. This is about me. Okay? Don't use your freedom to do things that are all about you, something that you crave, something that has to do with yourself. Okay. So why would that happen though? I know I don't want to keep reiterating the same point, but why would the risk be the risk of having freedom in Christ? Why would the risk be launching into ungodly things?
They had like a lot of rules.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a lot of, I don't know, like, they didn't have freedom. They didn't, they had to walk around, whatever was unclean and, all these
Yeah.
other, things
Yeah.
that are really, they're not living in the world we lived in today.
Right.
For sure. And I think to have, it's kind of like what you said, they've been good for so long, sitting on that bus,
Yeah.
figured out, and they're just going to be like, no rules? Okay.
Yeah.
Because they were under so much scrutiny.
Yes. Yeah.
They were truly bound by the rules.
Right. They were locked up by them.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. And just the amount of pressure they put on themselves to try to do everything right, and then
And on each other, because they like to
yeah, the judgment and criticism. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's exhausting too, to try to do everything right or make sure that people don't see you do something wrong because you don't want to hear about it, and so it would be this launching point to do things that are just completely self-serving. Now, you've got two groups of people still. You've got the Jewish Christians who Paul's saying, you don't have to live by the law anymore, and you're set free. And then you got also these Gentiles, these non-Jewish Christians, who have been told and been convinced, no, you have to buy into, you have to start obeying the law, that are now being told, no, you don't. And so it would be this celebration of liberty, but the risk would be just to go too far off the deep end, and to think, oh, this is awesome because I'm a child of God, so I got forgiveness anyway. And it would be like, I mean, you've seen it in movies or stuff, or maybe you knew somebody like this personally, like the rich kid who's got the rich parents who always bail him out of trouble. And no matter what, I can do whatever I want because do you know who my family is? That kind of mentality. And there would be some of these folks that would have that same kind of heart, that same kind of mentality about God. Oh, I'm a child of God, and He's going to forget. He's already set me free, and I get all the benefits of being a child of God, and I don't have to get circumcised and all that kind of stuff anymore. Awesome. I can do whatever I want. Why? He's going to bail me out anyway. I'm His kid. Right?
I feel for the gotta just get, it's Christ Jesus. But he didn't have like, here's my letter, and here's like my attachment to the letter. And it's like, here's all the laws that like, remember, we're still keeping them, but it's the spirit of it, not the legality of it. And like, I'm trying to think like they would think of like, where are those boundaries now?
Right.
So because we're free, but we're free to a point. But what point in Jesus? I don't know.
Right. So I think that's what he's going to say next. But it's, I agree with it. Like, it would be a struggle. And again, this is Paul like trying to address it before they start doing it. Paul's already assuming there's going to be some of you that as soon as I say, no, you're free, they're just going to take off running, and do whatever you can. Before you do that, hold on. Don't use your freedom as a launching point to indulge the sinful self. So we haven't read the last sentence, the last part of verse 13. What does he say? Instead to do what? Serve one another in love. So again, that Greek word of sinful nature or flesh, whatever, that's self-focused. I'm using my freedom to do the things that I want to do that make me feel good, that benefit me. And Paul says, no. Use your freedom to do what? Serve other people. Make it about other people. Okay? Yes. Now, the word here to serve, there's a couple different words for serve. There's a couple different words for servant, if we go back to the ancient Greek that this was originally written in. But this would be the word, and it's used fairly often in the New Testament. This isn't the only place that it's used. But it's the word that literally means like a slave, a bondservant, like someone who, let me look at my notes here so I say it right. Someone who is in bondage without any rights or privileges of their own. Okay? So Paul says, I want you to see the contrast here in this one verse. You are called to be free. No chains, no limitations. You're set free. So use your freedom to do what? Be a slave. I mean, he uses that word intentionally. Use your freedom to enslave yourself to other people. That's the kind of language that he uses. Does that make sense? Now, what he's talking about, to serve one another in what? In love. I'm not doing it out of obligation. I'm not serving you because you're making me do that. I love you. I care about you. I want to see good things happen for you. And if that means putting myself on the back burner for a few minutes or a day or two or whatever, fine. I want to serve you. Up to this point, these people who have been trying to convince the Galatians to come back over to following Jewish laws, has that been for those people's benefits or those teachers' benefits? It's very self-serving. Paul's already said it. Those people just want to recruit you to their side. It's all about them. And Paul's whole point is, if all of you would just make the effort to make yourself like a slave, mentally, emotionally, when it comes to somebody else, what do you need done that I can do? That even if you're not asking me, I recognize you have a need and I'm going to meet that need. Not out of guilt, but out of love. Not out of obligation, but because I care about you. If all of you were using your freedom to do that for each other, that'd be amazing. And that's what we need to be shooting for. Does that make sense? But I think he uses those words on purpose. You've been called to be free, so use your freedom to be a slave. Okay? Not enslaved to rules and regulations, enslaved to meeting the needs of other people. Thoughts? If you have any. Okay, let's keep going. Verse 14. Some translations have the word for. Mine doesn't, but it's a connecting sentence. Okay, serve one another in love, and if you want to put the word for, the entire law is summed up in a single command: love your neighbor as yourself. Have we heard this before? Who said this? His name starts with J, ends in Jesus. Jesus, very good. All right. So in Matthew, you don't have to turn there, but in Matthew chapter 22, when Jesus is asked what the greatest commands are, what's his answer? Love God with everything that you are and love your neighbor as yourself. And he's quoting, I mean, this comes from, like, the love your neighbor as yourself comes from the book of Leviticus. It's what God wanted for his people to do in the first place. But Jesus says there in Matthew chapter 22, all the law and all the prophets hinge on those two things. So Paul is even saying, like, you know, the whole circumcision and the Passover and all those rules and regulations, those were centered on loving God and loving other people. That was the whole focus of God's plan from the beginning. Okay? That hasn't changed. So even the people that would sit there and go, well, Paul's just trying to just completely throw away everything that we're accustomed to and everything that we've always been raised to be the right way to do things. Paul quotes the old law and says, this was what God wanted from his people, from his children, from the beginning. This is what he has always wanted. It's for you to love each other. Okay? So enjoy your freedom, but use your freedom to serve other people. Why? Because that's what God wants from you. It's what God has always wanted from you. All right? In verse 15, if you keep on biting and devouring each other, watch out, or you will be destroyed by each other. This word biting, does anybody have a different word there? Does everybody have biting? Biting and devouring? Yeah.
I realize I flipped to like a different version. I probably was
That's fine.
something earlier this week that I didn't understand, so I flipped over. But so it's kind of an interesting translation.
Yeah.
But it says critical and catty.
Critical and catty.
Very modern translation.
Yeah.
Don't be critical.
Don't be critical and catty.
It says love others as you love yourself, but instead of showing love amongst yourselves, you're always critical and catty. Watch out. Beware of ruining each other.
Yeah. That's not bad. Critical and catty. So the word here for critical or biting and yeah. No, just that word biting. This is the only time in the New Testament this word is used. So you won't find it anywhere else. Okay? And then the devouring is it goes beyond just, like, consuming something. It's like wholly swallowing something. And so this phrase, biting and devouring, Paul is trying to draw an image of, like, wolves attacking some defenseless animal and just
And digested.
Yes. Yeah, not even necessarily like biting as in tearing away, flesh and then swallowing, maybe without even chewing because you're so ravenous for it.
The ESV has just a little note, and it says, "Hey, check out Philippians 3." And so I looked, and it says Philippians 3. It's not the same word, but it says, "Look out for the dogs. Look out for the evildoers.
Yeah.
Look out for those who mutilate the flesh." And with what you're saying of, like, a dog is not very nice in the way that he's mutilating the bones of a rotisserie chicken or anything.
Right.
This is the, like, ravenous.
Yeah.
Scary.
And I am so hungry. I don't care what is happening to my prey, and I don't care about how I'm tearing it apart because I'm so focused on satisfying my hunger in that moment. Okay? And if you think of it like, I don't know, like a little deer in the woods and wolves attack it. I'm diving in there and fighting with the other wolves to tear apart my piece for me. Right? It's very self-serving. Now, to me, this is me personally. This is weird imagery. Like we just got done talking about freedom and serving and loving one another. Serving one another in love. And then he says, if you are biting and devouring each other, which implies what? They are biting and devouring each other. You're tearing each other apart. How is the Galatian church, based on everything we've been talking about for the last several weeks, how are they similar to wolves tearing at defenseless prey? I mean, it's kind of weird. I had to think about it myself for a little bit.
Maybe you're talking about the Gentiles who didn't come up with all of the rules and regulations
Mm-hmm.
that the Jewish Christians did.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just like the Gentile Christians are coming in like that young deer
Mm-hmm.
there, and the Jewish Christians are like, you have to do this, you have to do, and they're pouncing on them. And
Yes.
they're just hitting them with rule after
Mhm.
rule after rule till there's nothing left
Mm-hmm.
of their original love for just the freedom of Christ.
Yeah, I think you're right on it. I mean, there are people, you know, you don't have to say any names, but I guarantee you can think of somebody that just, somebody in your life, maybe is somebody that you worked with, maybe somebody at church, maybe somebody in your own family, who it seemed like could not wait to pounce on somebody else's faults when they messed up. And just, look what you did wrong. And criticize them, and which goes back to, you know, your translation of being critical and catty. Just like, I'm going to jump on your faults. And if these Jewish Christians have now laid this extra burden on these Gentile Christians as far as, like, you know, circumcision and Passover and all these rules, and then they're not doing it, or not doing it to their level of expectation, and they're just going to jump on them in front of everybody else, and look how they're failing at this. He says, you know, if you're doing this, again, implying you're doing this, watch out, because what's going to end up happening?
You'll be destroyed.
Okay, what happens when those wolves get that bloodlust and just dive in? What do they end up doing?
Fighting amongst themselves.
They destroy each other in the process of trying to eat up this one thing, right? Paul says, this is what's on the horizon for you guys. This church in Galatia, and this is going to cease to exist. The connections and relationships that you guys are building with each other through Christ, and the impact that you can have on the community that you're in, is being destroyed and will completely be obliterated because you guys are attacking each other. And there's a world in darkness, and there's a world lost in sin all around you. And it's going to continue that way because you guys devoured each other. Instead of worrying about trying to be loving to other people. Does that make sense? It took me a while to get there. I was like, biting and devouring. But then once you start looking at it through the lens of like how we attack each other in our criticism, man, this is, I was just about to say, this is a risky thing for the church. Why do we think that the church it's shrinking overall? Why is Christianity and why are churches closing their doors in our country? Bunch of different reasons. You know one reason why? Because the outside world, the people who are not involved in the church, see us being so critical, not just of them, but of each other. And we spent decades in the 1900s pointing out all the things that all the other groups were doing wrong.
And we're devouring ourselves.
We were biting and devouring each, and not that we're not now, but I'm saying like it was heightened, I feel like, in the 20th century, of just all the different denominations pointing out all the faults of each other. And in the process, we completely undermined people's desire to even want to be a part of what we got.
Well, Satan laughs. Right?
Yeah.
Because
While Satan laughs, it's like, watch this. Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
doing it for 'em.
So it's very sobering, honestly, to think about. And this is the warning that Paul was giving them. You're on a path right now because of what you've been doing. And this, again, let me interrupt myself. Like, we've talked about how Paul has been very antagonistic, you know, and just like he is emotional about how they have walked away from what he originally taught them, right? And it's personal for him. We talked about that. This, I feel like, is him. It's more of a compassionate plea, like, please stop doing this. This isn't just about me. You're hurting yourselves. And in the process of hurting yourselves, you're hurting your influence. You're hurting your impact. You're hurting the cause of Christ. Please stop doing this. Okay? Don't use your freedom to attack each other. Gentiles, the Gentile Christians, would have every reason to attack back at these Jewish Christians now who've been saying, no, you got to do all these Jewish things. No, I don't. And start attacking them, right? So again, Paul's trying to head things off before they actually happen. Any other thoughts or comments from y'all?
I talked to Raina about, like, do you want to be right or do you want to be loving? And right now, as a 6-year-old, she's like, no, I want to be right. Like, I don't care if I read things right. I want to be right.
Yeah.
But that's the,
We're still that way.
yeah, I mean, that's the, you know, you can do both. You can hold fast to truth but still be loving at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the malicious intent of a 6-year-old of, like, no, here's the deal.
Yeah.
Hold you down.
Yeah.
Right.
But we'll justify it too. We'll justify being more right than somebody else, even if it destroys them.
Just allow me to play that out in.
Right?
All right, go ahead. Right. And then, like, we're gonna see like the consequences of like, right versus loving.
Yeah.
My Dr. Phil always used to say, you want to be right or you want to be happy?
Yeah, that's right. You'll be right or happy. Okay, I'm just looked at the clock, so I'm gonna move a little more quickly because some of this is what Brandon's going to talk about next week when we get into the fruits of the Spirit. So, verses 16 to 18, I'll read it real quick. So I say, live by the Spirit, you will not gratify the desires of the sinful nature, for the sinful nature desires what is contrary to the Spirit, and the Spirit what is contrary to the sinful nature. They are in conflict with each other, so that you do not do what you want. But if you're led by the Spirit, you are not under law. Okay, so living by the Spirit. I know there's a whole bunch here, and you may have to pick me up a little next week, Brandon, because I was hoping to get through all the works of the flesh, and we may have to start out with those next week. Sorry. I'm telling you, when I start talking about this freedom in Christ, I get too wordy. Living by the Spirit. So does anybody else have a different word than live by the Spirit? Walk. Okay. Which is the actual Greek word. And it's similar to another one of my 20 favorite verses in the New Testament. 1 John chapter 2, verse 6, where John says, whoever claims to live in Christ must walk as Christ did. It's the same, and it's the same, imagery. Here's the direction he's going. I'm walking in line with him. I'm going to walk in the same path. I'm going to walk the same direction. I'm going to follow his plan. Live in the Spirit. And then, if I do that, what do I not have to worry about? Live in the Spirit, and what won't happen?
Not going to gratify the desires of
You will not gratify the desires of the flesh, of the sinful nature. Okay? It's not going to be as big of a problem. Yes, ma'am.
Just when it says Spirit, is that in reference to the Holy Spirit?
Yes. Living by the Spirit is in this verse is talking about the Holy Spirit. Yep. Good question. Okay, and then verse 17, he says you got the flesh and the spirit. Those two things are the sinful nature in my translation. Those two things are opposed to each other. And this is not like there's some similarities and some differences. They're a little bit different than each other. These are the words that he used here is like these are diametrically opposed to each other. They're going in completely opposite directions. Okay? And you may remember the story. I'll tell the really abbreviated version of it. When I was doing youth ministry, we were having a teen Bible study at one of my teens' houses one night, and I had two girls who were neither one had much athletic ability at all. They were very academic, and they were into orchestra and things like that. So I thought it'd be a whole lot funnier to take those two girls and have them do this little experiment. And so I had them sit in the middle of the floor and have them sit with their legs out in front of them, side by side, and then I took duct tape and I taped their legs that were closest to each other. I duct taped them together from the knee to the ankle, just wrap, and duct taped them together. And then I said, when I count to 3, you're going to go to that corner and you're going to go to that corner, and whoever wins, I had probably a cookie or something. I don't know, something dumb. Anyway, 1, 2, 3, go. And I thought they would be kind of like, just kind of pulling. And man, they both just lunged in opposite directions and nearly yanked each other's legs out of their hips. And they were grabbing onto the carpet and pulling and they were screaming. One of them would turn around and hit the other one. And then, I mean, in good fun. I picked 2 friends, by the way. I want to make sure that but they were just, I let them go for about 30 seconds. I thought they're going to hurt themselves or hurt this house. Just screaming, clawing, trying to get away from each other. And I was like, this couldn't have worked out better, because that is what Paul says, living according to satisfying myself and living according to walking in the direction of the Spirit is going. That's what it looks like. That's how opposed those 2 things are to each other. They are pulling in completely opposite directions. And I have to decide, and this is the thing that Paul says here. It's my choice. I have to decide, spirit or self. And it's up to me. Okay? But I can't do both. And it'd be nice if they were just they're a little bit different, but I can kind of keep one foot in each. He's like, no, you can't do that, because these things are going in different directions. You got to pick one or the other. Okay? Now, then he says this in verse 18. But if you are led by the Spirit, you're what? Not under law.
That's like a bomb. Because I know what he just said. It's like, okay, if you're not led by the Spirit, not under the law. Ultimate freedom.
Yeah.
And he just got done not saying that. It's just hard to.
Okay. Yes. Go ahead.
I'm processing and thinking, because you're led by the Spirit,
Uh-huh.
not the law.
Uh-huh.
So you're to let the Spirit guide you,
Right.
not the law.
But the law is good. I mean, it's got good
The
stuff
law's
in it.
good,
Yeah.
And we keep in step with the law
But the Spirit,
Through the
the Spirit
Spirit.
should be guiding us through
through the law.
Right. The law of Moses and see, okay, but listen,
People.
okay. We may go a little longer than 11 o'clock, because I'm hearing what you're saying, Lori, and this is something brand new for me as I've been studying for this class. Okay, so I'm still kind of processing it myself, but I have a new theory that I want to share today, and I'm just going to I'll just say now, I could be wrong. So we can do some more study, and you can study on your own and be like, you're way off, and I won't have my feelings hurt. Okay. But to your point, Paul's already said the law is good, right? And it is. It's stuff that God said, this is what I want you to do to be my people. These are the regulations. These are the rules. These are the checklists. This is what my people need to look like, right? And in and of itself is a good thing. Brandon's talked about that multiple times. What was the biggest problem with the law? The rules were good. What's the problem with the law?
The rules are God.
It wasn't God's rules.
But the law couldn't do anything to save you. All the law could do was what?
Done.
And point out your faults and how you're falling short. And also, and he didn't really say that much in Galatians. He says it in other places, Romans, I think. The law, Paul even says this in Romans. He's like, I didn't even know what some of those sins were. I didn't know what coveting was. I was coveting. I didn't know I was coveting until the law said don't covet. And then I had to figure out what coveting was. And oh, now, and it just, but then he's like, but it made it worse. Because now I know that's wrong. So there were consequences to me doing something wrong. But now that I know it's wrong, and then I still do it, oh, that makes it even worse, right? Okay, so the law couldn't save. But the law in and of itself, I mean, it's from God. It's a good thing. And the Spirit should be calling me to do the same things, at least in principle, that the law is. So why would he say, especially when he's talking about sinful nature and spirit, and all of a sudden he makes a statement about the law? He hadn't talked about the law in this whole paragraph. What are we talking about here? So let me throw this out there, and we'll end class with this, and you can kind of chew on it. And like I said, if you want to say that I'm wrong, come back next week and tell me. Okay. What if he's not talking about the law of Moses here? What if he's not talking about the old law? Okay. Because the Greek word that's used here is nomos, which can refer to the law of Moses. It can refer to any law or rule or regulation. It could refer to Roman law. Or it could also mean like principle, just kind of guiding principles. Same word. Okay?
She's used before, right?
Yes. Okay. So if this isn't talking about the law of Moses, but he says if you're living under the Spirit, you're no longer under the law. Then which law is he talking about? Okay. Flip over real quick, just back a few books to Romans chapter 7, which is another one of my 20-some odd favorite scriptures. In Romans chapter 7, Paul goes through this long thing from about verse 7 on to the end of the chapter. And the context is, he's like, man, I know the things that I'm supposed to do. I know the good stuff that I'm supposed to do. And I know the bad stuff that I'm supposed to stay away from. And I really, really want to do the good things. I really want to. And I really, really want to stay away from the bad stuff. I really don't want to do the things that God doesn't want me to do. But what do I keep doing? The bad stuff. The things I don't want to do is what I keep doing. What do I stay away from? The good stuff. The stuff that I really want to do, I don't do it. Okay? That's a really quick summation of those several paragraphs.
I want to do that.
Yeah.
I want to not want
Okay.
to do it.
Okay, but look at this. Look at the words that he uses though. Okay. Verse 15. I do not understand what I do, for what I want to do, I do not do, but what I hate, I do. And if I do what I do not want to do, I agree that the law is good, as it is no longer I myself who do it, but it is sin living in me. I know that nothing good lives in me, that is in my sinful nature. For I have the desire to do what is good, but I can't carry it out. Verse 19. For what I do is not the good I want to do. No, the evil I do not want to do, this I keep on doing. I know that's a tongue twister, but you see where we're going here. Verse 20. Now, if I do what I do not want to do, it is no longer I who do it, but it is sin living in me. So I read all that to get to verse 21. Look at verse 21. So I find what? This what? Law at work. Okay. Is he talking about the law of Moses? In verse 21. Is he talking about the law of Moses?
Assuming no.
That wouldn't fit, would it? I find this, I mean, we could use the word principle. I find this law, this principle, this, it's almost like it's set in stone. This is what keeps happening. What's the law? What's the rule that he keeps falling under? When I want to do good, what happens? Evil is right there with me. For my inner being, I delight in God's law. Okay, so there's the law, like God's rules, God's regulations. But verse 23, I see another what? Law at work in the members of my body, waging war against the law of my mind and making me a prisoner of the law of sin at work within my members. Okay, let's see if I can try to make this clear. What if Paul in Galatians chapter 5 and verse 18, when he says, if I'm guided by the Spirit, I'm not under the law anymore. What if the law that he's talking about there in verse 18 is the same law, the same principle that he talks about here in Romans 7 verse 21, where he says there seems to be this rule in my life that there are things that I want to do, and but the bad choices are right there with them, and there's this. It's like a law that's written on my heart. It's like it's almost like a law of nature. I can't keep myself from doing the things that I know I shouldn't do. Y'all see that? What if that's the law that he's talking about in Galatians chapter 5 and verse 18? If I am living by the Spirit, that sets me free from this programming, this principle that seems to take over, where I keep doing things that God doesn't want me to do. If I would give into the direction of the Spirit, that breaks that law. That breaks the hold that habit keeps having on me. Does that make sense? It makes sense in my head. I'm not sure if I'm saying it correctly out loud. So I wonder if he's using the same terminology here. Again, same guy that wrote both books. He's writing to two different audiences, but in the same kind of context. Because that's what he's getting at here in Galatians chapter 5. I know the good things that I should do. I know the direction the Spirit's going, but what's the problem? I got me in the way. And I've got my selfish desires, and I got the things that would feel good to me and the things that would benefit me. And it's right there in the same time that I know I want to do the good things. I have this it's my programming. It's my yeah.
Law to imperfect human nature.
For sure, but I'm saying I think he uses the word law as again, I keep using that word programming. I mean, you think about computers and I don't know, robots, whatever. Like there's the programming language. Like it's something that this machine can only do this particular thing because that's in its programming. That's in its wiring. And Paul is saying that's in my wiring. The desire to satisfy myself and the things that I want to do, that's just wired into me. Like a rule, like a law. It's a habit. It's something that I can't break free from. Unless, what? Unless I live by the Spirit. I've been set free from the consequences of it through Jesus. But it is my choice as to whether I keep going in that direction, following the Spirit, or go back to my pre-Jesus programming and follow that law and those rules and that lifestyle.
I mean, that's life changing if that's true, right? Because being like, oh, I'm just like, this is just who I am.
Mm-hmm.
I can't stop looking at these things, saying these things, being with these people.
Yeah.
And the Spirit cuts off the code.
Yeah.
And says, nah, you get to choose now.
Yeah. The Spirit overhauls it. Breaks the code. I like the way you use that. It completely breaks the code. But then I've got the choice.
There's a triple dot. What's happening next?
Yeah. And I can follow the way the Spirit wants me to go, or I can go back to my original programming. Okay. Now, could the same principle apply to, the Jews who are living under the old law? For sure. But that's still that bonded, you can go back to the rules and regulations and the checklist and falling short and being exhausted because you can't do everything right and criticizing other people and being criticized by other people. And if that's what your programming has been to this point, that's what the law of your life has been to this point, and the rules guiding your life have been to this point, that's your choice. Or you can live by the Spirit. If your lifestyle at this point has been all the things that he's going to list that we didn't get to because we ran out of time in verses 19 to 21, all these different choices that are completely self-satisfying and self-gratifying, you've been set free from all that. But if that's your choice to go back to that, that's your choice. Or you can live by the Spirit. There's really good stuff that gets produced in your life when you live by the Spirit, which is what Brandon's going to talk about next week, whether he knows it or not. So again, it's just a different way. Most of my life, not that I paid a whole lot of attention to Galatians 5 verse 18 in the first place, but most of my life, whenever I've read through this, I've just assumed it's talking about the law of Moses. But it just, as I was studying for this class, I thought that doesn't really fit what he just got done talking about in verses 16 and 17. There's something else at play here. So then, I started thinking about Romans 7. I was like, oh, he uses the word law there too. Oh, I find this law at work. It's not a written down law. It's not the law of Moses. I find this principle at work in my life, this rule.
Scientific theory. I find this, like, this is how our bodies are wired.
Yeah. It's like a law of nature.
Yes, that's what
Yeah, for sure. This is the natural law I see on display in my life. And I can be set free from it. I'm not under it anymore if I choose to follow the Spirit. Something to think about, okay? You can study that on your own. And like I said, we can come back next week and be like, I think that's pretty accurate. Or you were way off. Good either way, all right? Thank you guys for coming today. Like I said, we will be here next Tuesday. We'll definitely get through the fruits of the Spirit. I don't know if we'll get to the end of the chapter or not. We're shooting for being done by the end of May, but I took too long today with what I had, so apologize for that. We'll see. We'll get there. So thank you guys, and happy Mother's Day coming up Sunday too.